Looks like the cops came for our Streetcar Named Desire episode, so we didn't record that. But if you have
My
a
God.
copy of it, let us know where it is. Yeah, we messed up on the recording. Well, messed up on recording the day of that of of that promised episode. We pulled a Jojo Rabbit for you guys, but our quick little thoughts on a Streetcar Named Desire. Good. I think I liked it more than Bruce,
Good play. Yes, yeah.
but
I found it hard to take it seriously with the main character doing the over the top accent that she did in our version that we watched.
but you'll never hear our thoughts about it aside from that. Anyways, do you know why we did that? It's because we're celebrating modernism, or really discussing modernism, because it's Modernism Month. Um, yeah, this is not just any book club. The book club where we read multiple books at the same time. This month's theme for what month it is May, April,
April.
April was modernism. I don't. The definition is a bit elusive, but essentially it's just like very proper standards of just like what fiction comes out to be. It's like it came after World War One, the Great War, and
Mhm.
we kind of where everybody was just kind of disillusioned, and it was a philosophical arts movement that kind of made art more cynical. So fun. It was in the early 20th century, so little did they know that it was going to get a lot worse um from there. But yeah. By the way, I'm Justin. I forgot to introduce myself. Sometimes I do that.
I'm Pierce.
He
I
forgets
read
to introduce
Mrs.
himself.
Dalloway.
Yeah. I read my favorite author, Ernest Hemingway, and his debut novel, or his first published novel, The Sun Also Rises, which, not the most enjoyable read, in my opinion, but people love it. I don't get it, but we'll get to that. Want to explain some modernism stuff? Besides that little brief intro that I did.
Um, sorry, I was reading something in the other window. Um, yeah, no, I think that's pretty good. I will say it feels like modernism kind of means a lot of different things to a lot of
Yeah, it's
different.
very loose.
Um, well, especially like across cultures. Um,
Mm,
Modernism to Kafka is different from modernism in the UK and
they all had their own
Ireland
perspectives. Yeah.
is different to modernism in the US. Um, but overall, I think in the US modernism kind of for some it was like kind of more of a simplification of writing, being more clear about what you want to say and what you want to get across to the reader. For others, it was about going beyond that and going a bit avant-garde and making it um, clearly decipherable but difficult to decipher. Um,
Yeah. Without getting too
James Joyce
abstract.
comes to mind.
Well, he is pretty difficult to understand.
Yeah.
That's pushing it in the modernism. Like, it's the right time period, but like it's
No, no, he's like a modernist author. He is
yeah.
like that's like his soul, one of his big like things that he falls under. Um, that's kind of what I mean. That it's like
Yeah.
it means very different things across cultures and across
That is
even in
true.
the U.S. where I feel like a lot of modernists are kind of simplifying. Like we have Faulkner too. I think he
Yeah.
counts.
And Hemingway.
Well, Hemingway simplified. That was what I was saying. It
Oh,
was
yeah. Okay, yeah. They're
contrasting.
dueling
Yeah,
authors.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We're, we are. We know our modernism. Essentially, it's just it kind of set the stage for postmodernism, where it also just like, let's throw away all the rules. But
Yeah.
yeah. Um. shall we get into our books? I've not read Miss Dalloway, so I don't have much to add. But if you want to, I've never read a Virginia Woolf novel, so
Yeah. Well, so Virginia Woolf herself, I read a little bit about her when I was going to read the book because
it helps.
I hope. Well, I also just hope to read more Virginia Woolf. I tend to like modernist authors a lot. I will say, I think after reading both James Joyce and Virginia Woolf, I've kind of shrunk that, like, oh, I love modernist authors, to I love lost generation authors, which is
Oh.
like specifically people who, not specifically, but like typically people who served in World War I, stuff like that.
Hmm.
Because I didn't love this book as much as I
Oh no.
typically love other modernist authors. Um, but Virginia Woolf, one of the most important modernists, she was from the UK. She was from London, actually, um, and she was she grew up affluent. She was homeschooled. Um, she was involved kind of early in her life in for like women's education reform and women's rights in general. Um, I'm not going to go too deep into her life. I think one thing that's important to mention is that there is a lot of, I don't know, I would have to read up on it again. Basically, there's like she was probably bisexual or even homosexual. I would have to read up on that again to know exactly which and remember what the evidence is. But it's very clear. I think that she had a relationship with a woman at one point in her life. Um,
Hmm.
oh no, she had several affairs with women.
Oh.
I'm just looking over. Yeah, so she was um, bisexual. Probably, as long as you don't think like, oh, you know, in her society she was supposed to. But she also said that she loved her husband to, you know, the people, other
Hmm.
people that around them. So I would assume that she was bisexual, but you know, different time. She could have felt forced into that relationship, I guess. If you want to uh, say that with some kind of evidence behind it.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so Mrs. Dalloway is a bit of a slice of life novel. It is a day in the life of Clarissa Dalloway, who is having a party, and she's planning this party, and um, that's basically it. To be real, but a few other things happen throughout the day, like her an ex-lover comes home. He was in India, and he comes back, and he's been engaged, but it's clear that they still. It seems like they both kind of have feelings for each other. But Clarissa is married, and you know he's engaged. But it's clear why he's come back, which is to kind of try and see if there's still a spark there. At least that's how I read it. Um, and so she's planning her party, and he kind of goes away after their interaction, and he ends up watching probably two of the it scans around a little bit throughout the novel, and you see like little bits and pieces from other characters who aren't Clarissa or this ex-lover, um, and he ends up watching for a while. I think he sees them in the park at first. Septimus Warren Smith, who was a World War I veteran, and um, he was kind of spending the day in the park with his wife Lucrezia from Italy, and she ends up taking him to the doctor, and he is, because he's having these like hallucinations and he's acting really weird and he clearly has what we would call today PTSD. um,
Okay.
and and so the doctor basically prescribes him involuntary committal to like a psychiatric hospital, a psychiatric ward. Um, and instead of going, he commits suicide.
Hmm.
Um, and she I think his doctor goes to Clarissa's party, ends up at Clarissa's party. Um, if I'm not mistaken, and that's how she hears of, oh, you know, this young veteran committed suicide. Um, uh, and you know that's why the doctor arrives late to the party, and Clarissa kind of separates to think about um, his death, and it. I know it sounds like I've been struggling, and it's
It
because I've
is.
been thinking about some of the things in this book, and it is very. Um, you remember when I said like I kind of separated the U.S. and the U.K. and that the U.K. and
Mm-hmm.
Ireland and they kind of were making things a little bit more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say that because probably the most influential modernist from the UK in Virginia Woolfe and the most influential from Ireland in James Joyce both are making things more complicated. In fact, this has been compared to Ulysses. And
Ooh.
so like um part of the reason why we didn't record the streetcar episode was because we've had finals and we've been extremely busy. And so I was not able to. I read the whole book, but I didn't feel able to give this book the time it deserved to
Mm-hmm.
really understand it on a deeper level. And the end of the book really is her kind of thinking deeply about this young veteran's death and kind of
Like.
there's like this. It's kind of like admiration for him
Mm-hmm.
for not like giving up a part of himself to go into the psychiatric ward. I want to say.
I'm
Um,
assuming also around this time probably wasn't the best idea because I'm assuming maybe a lobotomy would have happened.
yes, it's actually that is something that would be interesting to look up. That is totally possible.
I
Um,
just know they probably didn't treat them very well, especially with people with PTSD. Um,
yeah. Well, so it's also interesting because
oh,
Virginia Woolf actually committed suicide.
mm,
Um,
body being
this
burnt
is
by
something
their
I
fire.
read. This is something I read about very early on. She was depressed a lot. She had really bad mental health, and she was really obsessed with death. And that's, I'm guessing, there's the admiration that Clarissa feels towards the end. You can kind of
Oh,
maybe put that onto Virginia Woolf a little bit. Um, and yeah, she it's quite sad. She she wrote a suicide note, which I've seen a few times at this point, even outside of just the research I did for this book. Um, she wrote a suicide note to her husband. Dearest, I feel certain I'm going mad again. I feel we can't go through another one of those terrible times, and I shan't recover this time. I begin to hear voices and I can't concentrate, so I am doing what seems the best to do. You have given me the greatest possible happiness. You have been in every way all that anyone could be. I don't think two people could have been happier till this terrible disease came. I can't fight it any longer. I know I am spoiling your life, that without me you could work, and you will, I know. You see, I can't even write this properly. I can't read. What I want to say is I owe all the happiness of my life to you. You have been entirely patient with me and incredibly good. I want to say that everybody knows it. If anybody could have saved me, it would have been you. Everything has gone for me but the certainty of your goodness. I can't go on spoiling your life any longer. I don't think two people could have been happier than we have been. Um, and so like I read that just to be like she. I want to say more about this book. I really do, but I do not feel uh I don't feel properly. Again, I just didn't give it enough time to really
Mhm.
like dig into the meaning of a lot of moments. I guess I'll say really quickly some of the things that did stand out. I did notice it was interesting. Kind of towards the beginning, there was a actually all of the interaction throughout the book between the young veteran and his Italian wife. The things that they kind of assume about one another, and the wife especially very early on she says something about like, oh, he could imagine his life without me, but I could not imagine my life without him. Men are selfish that way. Which I thought was very interesting as a quote. um but I bring up her death and the suicide in a way because um it's very clear, kind of,
Mhm.
even in this, the way, like I said, Clarissa ends with kind of an admiration of this man who committed suicide instead of getting help.
Mhm.
Um, so she was mentally ill as well. She had poor mental health, and she ended her life. I don't believe in exactly the same way because in the book he jumps out of a window, but um, I don't think she does that. Oh, she drowned herself.
Mhm.
Um, but alas, like still the same. She committed suicide. So
Mhm.
um, yeah,
Kind of a downer, but
yeah. I guess I'll say really quickly. Stylistically, I mentioned similarities to
the
Ulysses.
stream of consciousness. This is the one thing I know about this book. There's chapter
There
3.
is stream of consciousness, especially um, in like basically there will be a conversation between two people or a group of people, and then you get long portions that are just like, oh, this guy's walking through the park and he's thinking to himself, and it's basically like the chapter I really did not like from the beginning of Ulysses, like every like 20-ish pages or so, where they're just walking around and thinking about stuff. And yeah, um, I do want to come back and read this, but I also know just stylistically, it's not for me. Um,
Exhausting.
yeah. Uh, so maybe I should give another Virginia Woolf book a shot. But um, yeah, thematically, I've talked about mental illness. Um, there's kind of like I had read about this earlier. Um, there's a lot of focus on the passage of time. Um, there's a lot of pointing towards Big Ben. Um,
Mm.
it takes place over the course of a single day, and there's kind of like this inevitable push constantly towards the party, and or the events that befall all of the characters. Really, like the suicide of Septimus and the party at the end of the day, and how everything is just kind of moving inevitably towards that moment. Um, there's also feminism, and there's some. Clarissa is almost certainly somewhat gay. She very early on in the book, you find out that like she considers this moment where she kissed her friend one of the happiest moments of her life.
Mm.
So, um, yeah.
I, f- I feel like This book, again, since it's so almost autobiographical, this could almost be considered like a roman à clef, book
Hmm.
with a key. It's a French term, basically just basically fictionalizing your own autobiography using people that you know in real life and making them to characters and changing some details. Um, so
It is. It is possible. I definitely kind of read it that way after reading a little bit about
mhm,
Virginia Woolf, the affluent, the relationships with women. Um, I don't know why. I don't know anything about her real life husband, but for some reason, Mr. Dalloway, I was just like, yeah, that sounds like a classic like early 20th century English husband for some reason. Um, yeah, it definitely could be that for sure, I
mhm.
think.
Well, I mean, I don't have much to add. It does pique my interest, mainly because it reminds me a bit of Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, where it
Hmm.
does talk about depression in a very scarily accurate way that just seems horrifying. And I'm assuming, um, obviously mental health has gotten better. But around this time, this was written in the 20s, so it was before lobotomy, but like, it's still, they probably didn't treat their mentally ill fully sound. Um, Around the 50s, there was this was like when shock therapy and like bad kind of shock therapy, like like what do you see in the one that flew over the cuckoo's nest? Lobotomies were popular or on the rise. Basically, they did not see getting help as a way to do it. I think this even goes back into like the late 1800s. I don't know if you ever read the Yellow Wallpaper, but essentially, the doctors didn't know what to do with mental illness, so they would just prescribe people to just do something to just alleviate their mind and give them an occupation to do, just to distract themselves, and it never worked. The Yellow Wallpaper is a horror short story about a woman who's just recently bereaved, or I think she's like grieving someone. And the doctor essentially is just saying, "Go up in your attic and look at yeah, at the wallpaper, and then just clear your mind that way." It's a horror novel, um, and I'm assuming it's just like this is also reminiscent of just like healthcare or not healthcare, but just
Hmm.
like our understanding of the mind. I don't know if Freud's ideas about like psychology in the childhood and trauma. I don't even know if Freud had anything to do with trauma, but essentially, I just don't think psychology really made its way into our understanding of what it is now. Um, Thankfully, it's gotten a lot better, but it's not like this. No, it's been described here. All right. So
Yeah.
here's a book that Pierce has read, and here's a book that I just recently read. And Hemingway and I have had a bit of a spat, you know. I haven't always gotten along with him. I enjoy his short stories. His novels, maybe not as much. I read The Sun Also Rises, which was his first novel. Um, that made him. This was his first novel, and I think it was one of his most popular ones. I don't want to say it was number one, but Um, you would think it was that and or just like I think one of his last novels, The Old Man and the Sea. I think these two novels are kind of eponymous with Hemingway. Um, and essentially, it did receive mixed reviews on publication, but it has grown a legacy on its own, and also now it's in it's in the public domain, so that's cool. This is, I think, the epitome of what a modernist novel is. Again, exploring
At least in
disillusionment
America.
in America, that is true.
Yeah.
Specifically, the Lost Generation. Richard Stein coined this term. I think Hemingway also presented the notion that the Lost Generation was in fact resilient and strong, but like still disillusioned. Um, but um, I just did
I feel
not
like you
like
can.
this. Oh,
Yeah. I was gonna say I feel like you can find that idea specifically in Hemingway in a short story we read for one of his
oh,
episodes.
yeah.
The soldier
I
or the
I
I
don't. We should know this. It's
we
been a
should have
while.
known that.
Yeah. Um.
Soldier's home. Soldier's home.
Oh
Soldier's
yeah.
home.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Um. But Hemingway, this novel is inspired by true events. This is also considered a roman a clef novel with key because all the friends. I don't remember who is analogous to who or like how much of it is true, but essentially it is just essentially his friends and how basically they are just traveling around the world and after World War One, after the Great War, they are trying to find meaning in their lives. And the main character Jake, is an author who has become impotent and after an injury that he sustained during the war, which I think kind of speaks magnitudes about like just like I'm assuming this has been interpreted as in this way. Um, it's kind of like a romance novel, but the main character, the protagonist, is kind of on the sidelines, even though you kind of want him and Brett, who is the female lead, um, to be together, even though doesn't really turn out the way because essentially the one reason I just did not like this is because aside from the writing style, I know it's supposed to be very terse and it's stylistically like that, and there are some great sentences that like rely on the subtext, but there is so much subtext that it doesn't like you can't really, in my opinion, you can't really enjoy this on like a surface level. Um, it's kind of represent you actually do have to understand the time period and everything about it because it's just like it just doesn't click with me. I really hate to say this, but it just feels very aimless. And I know that a lot of the because a lot of the stuff is the things that they do, um, it's kind of meandering. And I get that it's explore like the emptiness of their lives, like Robert Cohn, which probably is the most annoying character in the book. He's seeking to relive his glory days because he was a boxer at Princeton. He hated boxing, and after he was graduated from Princeton, he is overly aggressive. He has this big ego. Still hangs out with everyone, but it just doesn't. He is annoying, and unfortunately, there are some anti-Semitic roots in this. I don't know if that was because of the person Hemingway knew in real life, or is it, you know, one of those interesting character flourishes that he added here. One of the aspects of the book that did not change well. I think we can both agree on that. Um, but aside from that, I just like the at least this book is divided into 4 books or 3 books or something like that.
Hmm.
The first 2 books at least are just like I hate to say nothing's happening, but it's it's just a bunch of people hanging out and drinking and talking about how boring life is after or meaningless like the world is. And it is kind of dour, but at the same time, every character just seems to be so insufferable, and I was not vibing about it. With it at all. And it just feels like there's just so much filler throughout. Um, I,
Well, from what I haven't read this book in a while, but from what I remember, it wasn't the like meaninglessness didn't completely come through in the characters' conversations with each other. It came through in the fact that they were doing the same thing over and over and over again,
just fun to
and
read.
and the thing that's interesting about it is the um when we when they go to Spain, right?
Hmm.
You imagine like this is a big change. They're taking a break. They're taking a vacation. They're gonna go have some fun in a new place and do something else. Um, Although I don't feel like tonally it quite it quite gets there to like prime your
Yeah.
expectations for that. But that's kind of what you imagine, and um, the characters that they add in Spain, the bullfighters, are interesting specifically because of what they say about meaning or
Yeah.
meaninglessness and purpose.
Yeah, the Matadors. I forgot who said the quote, but essentially, I think one of the characters before. I think this is like one of the bit of foreshadowing because I knew this book was about bullfighting, and they mentioned offhand, it's
Mm.
like I want to live like bullfighters who live on top of the world or something like that. So I'm assuming they just kind of put them on a pedestal because they always live on the edge here. Um, one thing I do want to say is that this book is essentially all about masculinity. It's right there in the main character again, who suffered an injury, fighting for his country. Or, well, I have my opinions about us being involved in World War I, but he was essentially fighting for his country, and he becomes impotent, literally, becoming kind of the embodiment of the lost generation because he cannot conceive. Um, cannot be with a woman again. Brett, who is a bit promiscuous to say the least, sleeps around with everyone. Um, the big irony here is that even though Jake does have an attraction towards her, he does not consummate or he can't really do anything.
Mhm.
The relationship would not come through. Which I think that's supposed to show that like there's some frustration in how romance kind of basically, they don't have an idealized a view of romance, probably after the war. Um, maybe I'm reading a bit much into that. Also, I did look up something, about a legend, an Arthurian legend called the Fisher King. Essentially, there was I think a king, who because, this is kind of analogous with, again, being fertile. After, the Fisher King, whoever that guy was, um, he was a figure, he was a character, in a Arthurian legend, and he committed a grave sexual crime. It's not ever said what it was, but because of this, it um it renders him like he was supposed to be the protector of the land, and now it renders him infertile, and now the kingdom's barren, and he can't even ride a horse. He basically is just because he can't get it up, now the world is going to go to waste because he can't have another generation um people. So I'm assuming the symbolism, the phallic symbolism that's all but stated is just kind of found in this little one character detail,
Mhm.
and the irony of it being in a quote unquote kind of romance but not really, kind of an anti-romance. um
Yeah. Well, and I think specifically in that the mentioning of other of new generations there, the people who have the most to teach from their experience in the war have no interest in metaphorically have no interest in actually having and raising children,
yeah. um and I'm assuming that
or at least
Cone,
lessons, I
yeah,
guess. Yeah.
I'm assuming Robert Cohen is supposed to. I maybe Hemingway is kind of progressive here. Maybe some toxic masculinity here. Um, so yeah, it is something that he kind of derides as just like something that shouldn't be happening. Um, so yeah. Um, and I think bullfighters again are supposed to be representing the epitome of just like what is the most masculine here. They engage in real link stuff, and I think kind of spoiler, but not really, because again, there's not much to spoil. Brett sleeps with one of them after she is just absolutely taken by one of them, and is like, "That's my goal. I'm gonna go for him immediately. You can't stop me." And she does, which I'm like, okay. And then Cone and the new Matador guy get into a fight, and Cone loses badly. Um, I don't know what that's supposed to represent. I feel like that should just be representing like the angst and like how perhaps this is kind of like a happy ending, how toxic masculinity and masculinity that's just based on aggression and diminishing the needs of other people, objectifying women
Well,
especially.
I th- I think it's more to do with youth. He loses
Youth.
to this new young bullfighter who
Mm,
is, um, yeah, he doesn't have the same experiences, and he's not there. There's like a, if I remember correctly, there's like a meaninglessness to everything that the bullfighter is doing and all of that. But and the bullfighter himself is feeling that. The main one who
yeah.
uh gets with sorry, what's her name? I'm blanking.
Brett. Brett? Are you talking about the woman
Brett,
or
Brett,
yeah?
Brett, Brett. Yeah, yeah. The main one who like gets with Brett and everything. He's like this new youth, but he also has um this like kind of meaninglessness the actions that he's taking, the things that he's doing. He doesn't. Um,
Is that a
and
nice
there's
guy?
also kind of like he's kind of like separate, like he's trying to separate himself from Brett a little bit towards the end, from what I
Hmm.
remember, which I feel like kind of represents the fact that the thing that she wants. First of all, it's not all that, because that bullfighter is not this like this meaning that she's projected onto him. He's not like, he still feels this, even though he's young and he's doing well for himself right now. There's this impending sense of meaninglessness that's coming for him. But then there's also like, she won't perfectly achieve that. Like, he will, he doesn't, that kind of person doesn't want her either. The person
Hmm.
who wants her is either someone she doesn't want, or someone who can't have her because he's um uh a eunuch. A
Essentially.
yeah, a you know, he became infertile because of the war, all
Hmm.
that. He so like there's this, the things she wants she can't have, and the things that she doesn't want, that want her, it'll never work out. It's kind of a tragedy in that sense.
Tragedy. Well, I mean, it would be tragic if I didn't really hate all these characters. I mean, yeah, they're all awful, and I enjoy my time with them. It wasn't like, ooh, the fun kind of bad. It's just like I'm not having fun with these characters at all. But there are
Mhm.
people that enjoy this book that are just proclaim it to be their favorite or whatever, their favorite Hemingway novel, which is like, wow, all right, go for that. But yeah, it just didn't vibe with me. I feel like I would I mean, I do think it's probably the most modernist book. Like, this is the epitome. It's emblematic of the entire Lost Generation movement. Just like, and represents all the disillusionment that they all felt, etc., etc. It's just like, man, I wish that I would have enjoyed this more, because I certainly did not. But whatever. I did try my best to at least see what other people were saying, and I did my best to try to understand it. But man, are these people just insufferable? Any other discussions about this that you want to add? Because
Um,
he is your boy.
no, yeah. Well, I don't. This is the one Hemingway novel, or one of two Hemingway novels that I've read, that I'm just kind of like. I mean, you can not like it. Like, I don't really. It doesn't bother me. Um,
Mhm.
it bothers me when it's something that like is very clearly quality, and it just feels like either there are people who are hating on it because it is Hemingway and they don't like Hemingway in general, or they're just not like quite seeing, what everyone else is seeing. This doesn't bother me that much, because the complaint is just like, it's about like what the book is, and that's fine.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It, it's yeah. I
there
don't know.
there there is something to be gotten out of this book, but like it's a complaint about like what's the plot, and you can't really, I don't think you can really argue that much with that, unless somebody's just blatantly wrong about the plot. But I mean, a lot of similar stuff happens for the first two thirds. I think it does really pick up in the final third when they go to
Yeah,
Spain, but
I was expecting it to
um,
be like, this is gonna be the best. This is where it gets, because you did warn me about that. I'm like, all right, here I go, and I'm like, right, when is it getting good? It's over.
I really was pulled in from the very beginning of when they went to Spain, like when he's kind of in like a cabin or a house that they've rented with one of his friends, and then they go out and they go fishing, and I really loved that section. I thought that
Oh
that
yeah, the
was
fishing session was cool.
that was a really
Fish. Yeah.
interesting way to kick it off, and it was different from everything else before it. And it really kind of was a hard divide for this section.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't have anything else to say besides that. Like, I did try to enjoy it. Like, I don't hate this book. It's just like, I mean, it is well written. I again, I don't hate Hemingway style, even though I don't know how many Hemingway books I've read and Hemingway stories where I don't think I've ever complained about, like, the writing about The Old Man and the Sea, but that was The first time I read it, I read that book 2 more times just to, like, spite, just be like, "All right, Pierce, I'm gonna read this book as many times as I can just to spite you." And the writing did grow custom. I did grow accustomed to the writing, and I'm like, I do like how terse it is and all that, but
Hmm.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I know this. I don't know if you want to be talking about this, but Hemingway or Faulkner, just throwing that out there.
Oh, well, I haven't read enough Faulkner.
Okay.
I feel like in the end, um, they fulfill two different purposes for
Hmm.
me. Like Hemingway is a very like this is what I'm saying, and anything that you want to get from underneath my words is up to you. And but I'm going to tell you directly what everything that I would need you or want you to know to get my point across.
Hmm.
Whereas Faulkner is very much like a I feel like
Prosaic, maybe.
yeah, it's like a lot purposefully deeper.
Hmm.
Not to say Hemingway's isn't deep, but I just mean like it's a little he makes it more difficult to parse out on purpose
Hmm.
to fulfill like some other meaning that you can't quite achieve with iceberg theory.
Yeah.
Um, he's trying to achieve a different feeling, a different tone, and a different
Apples to
type
oranges is what
type
I've
of
just
meaning.
pulled on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
um,
I don't have anything else to add. I'll still read more Hemingway just to find that one book, and maybe I'll read all the short stories just to become an expert and an author. I'm just kind of lukewarm on.
yeah. I think overall, like, I still do really enjoy modernism. I feel like it's a tough thing to pick out to say like, oh, I love modernism because it's so varied. And I'd love to give Virginia Woolf another chance. I just think A, Mrs. Dalloway, I was busy. B, Mrs. Dalloway wasn't really for me. Like just because, like I said, I compare it to the chapters in Ulysses that I don't really didn't really like that much. Um, so you know, I'd love to give Virginia Woolf another shot because I didn't hate her writing. I just
Wasn't the right
like
time.
stylistically, yeah.
Yeah.
Stylistically, this one specifically was a little and it wasn't the right time for me.
Yeah, especially
So
because it's stream consciousness, and I don't think there are any chapter breaks. So probably not the best way to be reading it.
yeah, I was just stopping whenever I yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You read a book at the right time, which, you
Mhm.
know what? We could be ending stuff at the right time, like right now. I think that was a good
Yep.
segue.
You can follow us on Twitter or TikTok at Not Just Any Pod, where you'll find information on our
Yeah.
podcast as well as memes, funny
And
little
content.
TikToks, content. Um, Please, if you enjoyed, give us a like, rating, follow, subscribe, whatever it is on whatever platform. We really appreciate it. And join
Share with your
us next
friends.
month. Yeah, and share. We really appreciate that. And join us next month for Vonnegut month, essentially Slaughterhouse 5 month. We both read Slaughterhouse 5.
Yes.
Um, Maybe
So,
we'll
yeah,
come back and do more Vonnegut in the future. Maybe if we both
possibly.
really enjoyed it. Possibly.
You'll find
But
out.
this month basically will end up being Slaughterhouse 5 month. So join us for that in late May.
And, the best part about this episode is that now you officially do not have to listen to the first episode because, one thing, it lacks Goodbye Prometheus.